Hello there everyone, it is Toby from TIJ Music and today is time for a new album review, and it is a new album review, emphasis on the new, and today I'm going to be reviewing Bruce Springsteen's new album Western Stars, which is the first new album I'm reviewing since this man back in March with Shine a Light. If you haven't watched that video yet, I recommend you go and watch that. It's a brilliant album. This one, it's good. I haven't really listened to much of Bruce Springsteen's new stuff until this, but I thought it's a new album, I want to get some content out on the music channel, so I'll listen to it. It's going to be a fun experience for me, and I can review the album as well. And I've only listened to it once, so it's not going to be too in-depth, but there's a bit of a background. It's a decent album. There's a few duds in there, a few really good tracks, and as I say, a few duds, but it's an average album and a pretty good album. So let's have a quick look at the background for the album. Now, it follows on from the 2014 album that Springsteen did, High Hopes, and from the 2012 album Wrecking Ball, and it's his first album of completely solo material away from the E Street Band since Devil and Dust. Is it Devil and Dust? Devils and Dust. Without the E Street Band now, 5. Now, I haven't listened to either of those 3 albums, so I can't really give you any intel about that. I'm more a fan of Springsteen's earlier stuff, although I haven't really delved into that too much either. I've probably listened to, maybe 20, 25 tracks from the earlier stuff. Probably delving maybe more into his middle stuff, the likes of Tunnel of Love and Human Touch, late 80s, early 90s, and I quite like that sort of stuff. But the album was produced by Ron Anillo, I think that's right in saying, who wrote with Springsteen on his 2 previous works. And there is a documentary on the making of the film that's been announced and that's been planned, so I look forward to watching that. Now, the album is influenced by Southern Californian pop music in the 70s, stuff like Glenn Campbell and that sort of thing. And upon announcing the album in April, he returned to my solo recordings. Again, apologies about looking away, but I'm looking at my computer for the notes, so I can't remember exactly what Springsteen said word for word. A return to my solo recordings featuring character-driven songs and sweeping cinematic orchestral arrangements. Definitely agree with that statement. With a range of American themes, highways and desert spaces, isolation and community, in the permanence of home and hope. Blimey, that's a lot, and really annoying. The sun's now a bit dodgy outside, but hopefully the lighting is still okay. Now, the critics have given this album a pretty good rep, to be honest. It seems that when these older artists bring out new albums, it's not as good as the original content, but again, they've really gone to town on this one. The Independent in the UK has given the album a 5 out of 5, The Guardian 4 out of 5. You'll have to wait and see if I give something that favourable to the album. But without any further ado, let's get into the tracks. Now, this is a new album review. I tend to delve into the tracks quite in depth on other reviews, but for this case, I've only listened to the album once, a few of the tracks twice, so what I'm going to do is go into each track, not talk about them in depth, but just talk about the notes I've made while listening to the tracks and give a rating on each song. So therefore, form my verdict on the whole album on my first listen. So the album starts, I have to say, a little bit disappointingly with a song called Hitchhiking. And I say hitchhiking, I'm not a colloquially an idiot who doesn't like to use the G on hitchhiking, but believe me, it's hitchhiking with an apostrophe, so don't get started on that one in the comments. But it's okay, it's decent, that's what I've put in my notes. It's probably a 5 out of 10, middle of the road for me. It doesn't really get going that much. It's, as I've put in my notes, a bit disappointing as the first track, but I thought it's intriguing because it sets tone for the rest of the album. A little bit of a slower pace, but certainly listenable. Listenable. A tad repetitive, but again, it's okay, but not one of the best, and certainly not one of the best on this album. But it is a little bit worrying, thinking, oh god, if the first track's not that good, then maybe the rest of the album might not be. But with plenty of experience listening to music, I know full well not to judge an album just off the first track. Then we move on to The Wayfarer. Oh, by the way, I think this is all the materials written by Bruce. I don't think anybody else is involved, so I'm going to presume it is just Springsteen that wrote this stuff, and of course it is his first album of solo material since 2005. Secondly, we've got The Wayfarer, and this is a little bit higher in my estimations at a 6 out of 10. Again, I've put good rather than okay, so a little bit more in the terms of the spectrum. It does get going a little bit more. Nice instrumentation, which is a nice and good theme for the whole album, really. As I said earlier, the orchestral arrangements, etc., are a real good theme in this album, and I really enjoy listening to the instrumental parts. And there's some little Roy Orbison almost influence stuff in this album. I'm a big fan of Orbison. I know Springsteen cites Orbison as a massive influence of his, so no surprise there. But The Wayfarer, again, yeah, it's good. It gets going a little bit more than Hitchhiking, and although it's not brilliant, it's better than Hitchhiking, which I suppose isn't a massive accolade, but again, a 6 out of 10. And we follow that trend going into Tuscan Train, which is the first single from the album if we're going in terms of songs. I think it was probably the third single if we look in terms of date. Again, this is the first single. Very nice musicianship. It's as I was going into this album, a lot of the songs I've put great orchestration, fantastic orchestration, and it's as that clearly shows, it's a real good theme throughout the album. And the song just flow nicely. It's quite a good, catchy song, and I can see why it's been chosen as a single as well as the other two. Although there is one of the singles that's a little bit worse than the other two, but we'll talk about that later on. Again, though, a decent track and probably well worth listening to. But now we go probably from about track 4 to track 8 to some solid tracks. Album tracks are usually the best. I've always said in my reviews, I've got a little bit of a prejudice towards singles because they like to be a little bit more radio friendly, but these next 5 tracks are brilliant. They went straight into my playlist, one after one, bang, 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 straight into my playlist, so pretty well received by me. So first we're going to look at Western Stars, which is a 7 out of 10 for me. You can see the spectrum slowly going up. That's not slow, that more like that, slightly going up. I don't know what I'm on about sometimes. But Western Stars, great easy listening track, great vocals from Springsteen. And I put on this track particularly is that this is the most Orbison influences, particularly the instrumentation. It feels like, and if you came into it midway through, you'd think, am I listening to Orbison or Springsteen here? Generally, the instrumentation sounds so good and so much like Orbison, and it's got that real cinematic feel that it is good. And it's a 7 out of 10 for me. It's a good listen. Again, I might warm to the song even more. That's something you've got to bear in mind in this review, that I haven't given anything 10 out of 10 because there's time for the music to develop and for me to develop more warmth for it. But I might not listen to the album again. It's just one of them things that I have enjoyed some of the songs, but I might not listen to them again. But yeah, 7 out of 10 for Western Stars. Then we move on to what is one of the best songs of the album, Sleepy Joe's Cafe. Now, clear tempo change here in the album, and I'll put in brackets, now we're really getting into it. It's almost Born to Run, Thunder Road type positivity. It's a real happy song. I suppose it might not be a happy song. I might be reading into it terribly in the fact that there's a little bit of an undertone there, but I'm not sure. But from listening to it, on face value, it's a really good track. Really listenable and really enjoyable, much like the next 3 songs. First off, Drive Fast, brackets The Stuntman. Bit of an interesting one, not so positive. From what I could gather about the song, it's somebody who has driven fast, i.e. been a stuntman or in that kind of line of work all his life and suffered many injuries, etc, etc. Whether that's a metaphor for something else, I don't know. But it's quite catchy. Again, the river like this one is, again, those 2 songs are very similar to those songs. I don't know whether they've drawn inspiration from there, whether I'm making up some bonkers comparison, but I'm not really sure. But again, a good song, a definite 8, and as I say, it's really nice that the album gets into it without that song. And then we move on to track number 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that number 7 now? Yeah, number 7, which is Chasing Wild Horses. And this, more than anything, is great orchestral work and an interesting song. Basically, the narrative of this song, I figured, was that the person's gone to chase wild horses, effectively, without saying goodbye to his friends. And I think it's possibly possibly autobiographical about Springsteen himself. It's a great song. I like some of the previous ones. It's got that real quality that maybe the first 3 songs didn't have. And I can't really explain what that is, but there's just a feeling you get with great songs compared to okay songs. You can see they're a little bit filler compared to stuff that, oh yeah, this has really got a listenable quality and a real enjoyment quality, whereas those first 3 tracks I didn't particularly enjoy that much. But yeah, great orchestral work, and that is then followed by the 5th track in this sequence, Sundown. Now, we've had 8s for Sleepy Joe Cafe, Drive Faster Stuntman, and for Chasing Wild Horses. And this one has an 8 as well, and all I put for this track is that it's great vocals. And it's nice to see, because some of the songs on the album, you can tell have probably been recorded maybe at different times, or maybe don't suit Springsteen's vocal assets. We don't need 2 plurals there. The English language mob would go absolutely mad. But yeah, great vocals on this one. I'm not really sure, as I say, whether some of the songs weren't necessarily written. I know they were written by Springsteen, but perhaps didn't reach his vocal assets as much. But this shows that Springsteen really still has it there, holding long notes, all that sort of thing. And again, the orchestration really shines. And without that, the album just becomes a little bit dull potentially, and potentially declines a little bit from highlighting that Springsteen's voice and vocals is massive in this album. But in this song particularly, Springsteen's vocals really shine. But then unfortunately we go to a little bit of filler with Somewhere North of Nashville. It's a short song, just under 2 minutes. Possibly filler, but then maybe there's an argument of being short but sweet. I might warm to that one as I listen to it more times, but then I don't really know. Again, that's the trouble with only listening to something once. I wanted to get this out on the first day for you guys to see, and I might listen to the album a few more times. I have to say, I'll talk about this a little bit more in the verdict, but it might be one I don't listen to again. Possibly I might just listen to a few of the tracks. But as it stands, Somewhere North of Nashville isn't really one I'm going to bother with, because it's a little bit like Hitchhiking. It's okay, but it's nothing fantastic. So then we go into the last 4 tracks, and this is where we pick up a little bit again, but not quite to the heights of track 5. It's track 5 to 8, yeah. Stones is the 10th song. It's a little bit repetitive, a little bit like the first one, but we can't really criticise that too much. The orchestration is brilliant on this one again. Great violin work, and interesting to see that shine through on this track. It highlights that it's more of a roots album for Springsteen. He's daring to go down routes that potentially he hasn't explored before, and he's not really bothering about that. That's what roots music's all about, and that kind of dumbed down music for trying new approaches, even though saying dumbed down and cinematic in the same sense is just completely mind-boggling. But it is. It gives that sort of feeling, and again, great violin work and really gives the song atmosphere. Not quite as good as the 4 I've mentioned earlier, that's hence why it's only a 7 out of 10. But again, a pretty decent song. And There Goes My Miracle follows on from that. Now, it's a second single, and as I've said earlier, we're pretty prejudicial around here about singles, but I can see why it's been chosen as a single. It's quite catchy, and for once in my life, I actually quite like that. It's again, it's just a good song, a little bit repetitive, and that's why it gives it the radio quality. But it's a good song. I enjoy listening to it, even though I've listened to it once. But that's one I can go and listen to again, and possibly to people who aren't massive Springsteen fans, I'd say, right, go and listen to this song, because if you don't have to be a fan of country, pop rock or Springsteen to really get into this, it's quite a nice, easy listening song, and as I can see why it's got a radio quality. And then we move on to the 3rd single, but the first one I think that was brought out chronologically, Hello Sunshine. Right, this is the 3rd single, and I'm quoting from Bruce here, it's about changing your perspective while there is still time, to enjoy the present and be optimistic of the future. Now, brilliant narrative, fair play and all that good stuff. But it just go on a little bit for me. I don't know whether I was waiting for the album to finish, I was like, oh, come on now. But that's not a bad thing, sometimes albums are better with 8 or 9 tracks. And that's one of the things that lacks here. If you scribbled out a few of the tracks, you'd go, oh, brilliant. There's some brilliant tracks in here. But that one, a little bit weak for me, I have to say. It goes on a little bit long. The vocals are a little weak, which seems a little odd, because if you compare that to a song like Sundown, it doesn't really make much sense. And then we go to the last track, which again has not really got much to it. Even though it's a 6 out of 10 like Hello Sunshine, it's not quite as bad as Hitchhiking. I might be a little bit nasty on Hitchhiker. I'd love to see your opinion down in the comments. What is your favourite song off the album? I'd love to know. But Moonlight Motel, it's a close to the album. It's slow paced, but it hasn't really got much to it. But again, it's a decent song. So that's all the tracks we've gone through, and the verdicts, as a rating, just have to scroll down on the screen there. The album comes in at a 6.7 out of 10 based on all my ratings, which I think is absolutely fair enough. It's not quite at that 7 out of 10 mark where it's fantastic, but it's not below a 6 where it's average. It's sort of in that middle ground area, which I think is absolutely right for this album. There's some cracking tracks, some not so cracking, but a good album nonetheless. So that's going to be it for my review of... I've forgotten what the album was called there. How embarrassing. Yeah, that's going to be it for my review of Western Stars today by Bruce Springsteen. I hope you've enjoyed it. Make sure to go and check the other reviews out on my channel. There will be regular reviews and top 10s of my favourite music, and you might get an idea from the Pink Floyd, the Bryan Adams and other stuff on my channel what I like, but there's going to be a lot of variants in that over the next few months, so if that's something you're looking forward to, leave a like here, comment your favourite Springsteen song and your favourite Springsteen song off the album below, and subscribe for weekly music content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all later. Goodbye.